Welcome to Power, Policy, and Progress, the podcast where politics, policy, and the stories shaping our future take center stage. I'm Madison Maynard. This week, we are covering some of the biggest political and cultural developments making headlines across the country. If you haven't watched the very first episode of my podcast, please do so on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. However, you're watching or listening to this episode, you could do the same for episode 1. So, first in this episode, we'll head to Maine, where Democratic Senate nominee Graham Platner emerged from a turbulent primary victory and now faces one of the most consequential Senate races of 2026 against the longtime Republican Senator Susan Collins. Then we'll travel to California, where the race to replace Governor Gavin Newsom is officially set. Democrat Xavier Becerra will face Republican Steve Hilton, a candidate that was backed by President Donald Trump, in a battle that could reveal a great deal about the political direction of the nation's largest state. We'll also revisit one of the defining moments of the 2024 presidential election. Former First Lady Joe Biden is opening up about President Biden's disastrous debate performance against Donald Trump. Don't remind me of that. Revealing new details about what she witnessed that night and how it ultimately shaped the future of the campaign. Later, we'll examine the growing turmoil surrounding CBS News and 60 Minutes, from high-profile firings to accusations of political influence. The controversy is raising new questions about media independence, public trust, and the role of powerful figures, and how it continues to play a role in shaping the American news landscape. And finally, we'll close with a difficult but important conversation about justice in this nation. We'll compare the cases of Karmelo Anthony and Cyrus Carmack-Belton, two cases that have sparked national debates over race, self-defense, and whether the justice system delivers equal outcomes for all. All of that and more coming up on this episode of Power, Policy, and Progress. Let's get right into it. So first, we'll head to Maine, where Graham Platner officially won the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate, setting up a high-stakes November showdown against Republican Senator Susan Collins. Platner, a Marine veteran, oyster farmer, and first-time candidate, has become one of the most unconventional Senate nominees in this nation. His populist, progressive message has resonated with many Democratic voters, and he earned endorsements from prominent progressives, including Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. But his path to the nomination has been anything but smooth. And we've talked about it on this podcast, and we're going to continue to talk about it on this podcast. In recent months, Platner's campaign has been rocked by a series of controversies, including offensive old social media posts, revelations that he once had a tattoo widely recognized as a Nazi symbol before he covered it up, and reports detailing allegations of his behavior in past relationships. Platner has apologized for some of his past comments, but he has also denied allegations of abuse and has spoken openly about his struggles with PTSD, depression, and alcohol use after serving in Iraq. Despite the turbulence, Platner won, and with most votes counted, he led former Governor Janet Mills by roughly 72% to 20%. Mills had suspended her campaigns weeks ago, but nearly 30% of Democratic voters still chose someone other than Platner, suggesting that some Democratic voters remain uneasy, understandably so, about his candidacy. In his victory speech, Platner tried to shift the focus away from his controversies and towards the general election. He argued that his campaign is about working class Mainers and criticized Senator Collins for what he described as siding too often with Republicans and President Donald Trump. The race is expected to be one of the most expensive Senate contests in this country. Republicans have already reserved tens of millions of dollars in advertising, and Democrats see Maine as one of their best opportunities to flip a Republican-held seat as they try to regain control of the Senate. So the big question now is whether Platner's grassroots appeal and progressive message can outweigh the baggage that has followed him throughout the campaign. The answer could determine not only the future of Maine Senate seat, but also the balance of power in Washington. This is not a surprise at all. It's not a surprise that Graham Platner is the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate seat in Maine, but it is incredibly disheartening and disappointing. I want to just point out why he has all these controversies. I laid it out just a few seconds ago, but I want to really lay it out for you all. He has downplayed military sexual assaults and suggested victims should, quote, take some responsibility for themselves to avoid compromising situations. Are we kidding? Are we serious right now? He has made incredibly stupid racist remarks, such as asking on his social media a few years ago why Black people don't tip. Ridiculous. He has also made frequent use of homophobic slurs, derogatory words for mentally ill individuals, and mocked a Purple Heart recipient. I mean, this is absolutely horrific that the Democratic Party chose to back Graham Platner. He had a Nazi tattoo. He ultimately covered it up, but he had a Nazi tattoo. He claimed that he didn't know that it was a Nazi symbol. I don't believe him because he told an ex-girlfriend, this is from reporting from the New York Times, he told an ex-girlfriend that it was a Nazi tattoo. He has told people that he has a Nazi tattoo. So his campaign and Graham Platner himself can lie and say he didn't know that it was a Nazi tattoo. I don't believe him. I don't believe him at all, especially based on his horrific comments that he's made in the past. I think that both sides of the aisle are disappointing me when it comes to this conversation about Graham Platner. Well, I don't want to say Republicans are disappointing me. It's not surprising, actually. So let me not say that Republicans are disappointing me. Democrats are. But Republicans, they continuously are wrong and they continuously say things that make no sense because Republicans are going on Fox News and even, pundits on CNN. They are so disturbed about Graham Platner. They are so disturbed by Graham Platner when they are backing Donald John Trump. They are backing Donald Trump. Let's not forget that President Trump has repeatedly associated himself with white supremacists and Nazis. He refused to condemn David Duke. He has dined with Nick Fuentes. After Charlottesville, during his first term, he said that there were bad people on both sides of Charlottesville. Like, Republicans are the last ones that should be clutching their pearls about Graham Platner. They really are. They are the last ones that should be doing that. But I'm not surprised. But they're the last ones that should be doing that. Democrats, on the other hand, I'm disappointed. That many Democrats are excusing Graham Platner's behavior and choose to overlook it. I do believe that this is difficult. It is difficult because we need the Senate to go blue, to turn blue after the midterm elections. We need red seats to flip blue. We need it. We need checks and balances in this nation, and there are no checks and balances right now. We have to have the Senate turn blue and the House to turn blue. there are avenues that can ensure that this doesn't happen. Maine is one of them. And now I'm questioning if Graham Platner can even win. And that is why I guess Democrats are trying to throw their support behind him, because it at this point is desperate. This is a desperate situation because we need to flip these seats blue. We have to, right? So I guess that is why publicly Democrats are getting behind Graham Platner and they are excusing his behavior, because this is definitely a difficult situation. Maine was a perfect opportunity to ensure that a red seat is flipped blue. Kamala Harris won Maine in 2024. She won in Maine. So this was the perfect opportunity. And I do not know if Graham Platner is going to win. I don't think he's going to win, especially because 30% of Democrats in Maine, Democratic voters in Maine, 30% of those individuals did not vote for Graham Platner. And I can bet that at least half of those individuals are going to vote for Susan Collins because they feel uncomfortable with voting for Graham Platner. If I was a Maynard, I would feel so uncomfortable to vote for Graham Platner. I understand why 30% chose to vote for former Governor Janet Mills or another candidate on the ballot. I completely understand. I completely understand. It's just disappointing that this is the guy that Democrats chose to get behind so early on. They should have looked into him and his background before Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren jumped on the Graham Platner train, because I'm sure it wasn't that hard to find all of the horrific things he said online. I'm sure it wasn't hard to find the information about his horrific relationship with women that he's had in the past. So I just wish that they chose a better candidate. I just do. And I am disappointed in Democrats making excuses for Graham Platner. A lot of Democrats are saying he didn't know it was a Nazi tattoo. Come on, guys. Are we really believing that? Because I don't believe that at all. So this is difficult. And I'm not going to just downplay and say, oh, it's easy. This is a really difficult situation that we're in, because Donald Trump is operating as an authoritarian right now. He is. And we have to flip the House and the Senate blue. We have to do it in order to ensure checks and balances. So it's disappointing. I'd rather people be honest and say, we're willing to overlook his horrific past because this is incredibly consequential. This is an incredibly consequential race, and we have to flip Maine blue. If you say that, I will probably have more respect for you. But for the people that are trying to downplay his comments, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I really don't. So, but we'll see if more information comes out. I wouldn't be surprised if even more information comes out about Graham Platner and more stories from previous girlfriends come out and say he did this to me and we have a volatile relationship. I wouldn't be surprised if more of his social media posts and more of those come forward. I wouldn't be surprised if more of those come forward and more people find things he said online. I don't think that this is over. I think this is actually just the beginning, because this guy is clearly a horrible person. And like I said, people can change. But do we know that he has? I'm not convinced yet. John Fetterman, for example, everyone was so happy when he won against Dr. Oz, which was valid. But now look at him. Now look at Fetterman. He completely has reversed everything that he ran on during the campaign. Completely reversed it as soon as he joined the United States Senate. Ridiculous. So I would not be surprised if Graham Platner is a John Fetterman 2.0. Based on his past horrific comments, I would not be surprised at all. But we'll see, and we'll keep following the story. If more information comes out, I will be covering it on this podcast. So let's move on to California, shall we? So in California, the race to replace outgoing Governor Gavin Newsom, who is definitely running in 2028, but that's a conversation for another podcast episode, is officially set. Democrat Xavier Becerra and Republican Steve Hilton have advanced to the November general election after finishing as the top two candidates in California's primary election. Becerra, who previously served under President Biden as the U.S. Secretary for Health and Human Services, and he also served as California's Attorney General. He finished first in the primary, but Hilton, a former Fox News host and advisor to former British Prime Minister David Cameron, he secured the second place spot, and he edged out billionaire Democrat Tom Steyer, who spent a lot of money, everyone, like a lot of money. He spent $216 million of his own money on his campaign, and he still failed to advance. I mean, he's a billionaire, so he'll be okay. Hilton's victory sets up a clear partisan showdown in November. He was endorsed by Donald Trump and has campaigned on reducing taxes, cutting regulations, and addressing affordability concerns across the state. Hilton has also called for voter ID requirements and reforms to speed up California's vote counting process. Becerra, meanwhile, is running as a moderate Democrat and has emphasized his experience in government, his working class roots as the son of Mexican immigrants, and his record in both state and federal office. If elected, he will become California's very first Latino governor of the modern era. The race is also highlighting broader national political themes. Becerra has sought to tie Hilton closely to Trump, whose approval ratings remain low in California, while Hilton has argued that Becerra represents a continuation of the Democrat policies that have governed the state for years. Meanwhile, another major California political story is unfolding in Los Angeles. Mayor Karen Bass will face Nithya Raman, who is a progressive city council member, in November after Raman surged past Spencer Pratt, a Republican reality TV personality, for the second spot. So this matchup will definitely be more of a generational battle within the Democratic Party between the city's political establishment and a younger progressive movement. So this is not surprising at all on both the mayoral race and the governor's race. So starting with the mayoral race, Spencer Pratt was not going to advance. He just wasn't. He just wasn't going to advance. LA is a progressive Democratic city. Anyone who thought that Spencer Pratt was going to secure the second spot doesn't know LA, clearly. Clearly doesn't know LA for what it is. And it is a democratic and progressive city. Donald Trump said that the election was rigged. Spencer Pratt to secure the second spot. Donald Trump, anytime something doesn't go his way, Donald Trump is going to say it's rigged. I mean, it's Los Angeles, everyone. It's Los Angeles. For the governor's race, Xavier Becerra really came out, I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but his victory was a surprise for many people, including myself. Before Eric Swalwell's horrific allegations came out against him by women who accused him of sexual assault, I definitely thought he was going to be the one to advance to the general election. However, since he dropped out of the race, a lot of the Eric Swalwell supporters went to Xavier Becerra. And a lot of people in California, it's clear that they want someone with experience. It's clear that they want someone with experience. And that's why they went for Xavier Becerra and not billionaire Tom Steyer. They wanted someone who has years of experience, and someone who they could trust to lead the state of California, the nation's largest state. So I definitely am happy that California chose Becerra. I think that if elected, he would be a great governor. Steve Hilton is not gonna win. I mean, he advanced, but at the end of the day, it is California. It's been 20 years since a Republican has won in California. And I don't think now would be the time that a Republican would all of a sudden win. I think that Steve Hilton won those rural areas, and that is why he secured the second place spot. However, I don't think that he's gonna win against Xavier Becerra. Xavier Becerra is very popular amongst Democratic voters. I think he's going to be more popular among independent voters than Steve Hilton would be. So it's not surprising. And I'm also curious, what is Trump's rhetoric going to be now? Now that Steve Hilton did secure the second spot, is he still going to say that the elections in California are rigged? His guy made it to the second spot. Is he still going to say that it's rigged? I don't think he's going to completely backtrack, but I do think that if Steve Hilton doesn't win, which he won't in November, Trump is going to be like, it's rigged. It's rigged. It's clear that Steve Hilton was going to win, and clearly they rigged it. That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. But we're going to keep following this closely. So let's move on. So Joe Biden has written a book, and in this, she is speaking about the pivotal moment in the 2024 presidential election, the June debate between then President Joe Biden and then candidate Donald Trump. In her new memoir, View from the East Wing, and in recent interviews promoting the book, she is speaking publicly about the night of the debate. According to Joe Biden, watching her husband's debate performance was deeply alarming. She said that she watched from backstage and she feared something was wrong, seriously wrong, recalling that her immediate reaction was, oh my gosh, is he having a stroke? The debate held on June 27th, 2024 became one of the defining moments of the election cycle. Millions of Americans watched as President Biden struggled during the debate. He couldn't answer basic questions. He frequently lost his train of thought multiple times. And this performance intensified concerns about his age, rightfully so, and his fitness for office. And it sparked weeks of debate within the Democratic Party about whether he should remain as the nominee. In her account, Joe Biden says that she has never seen her husband perform that way before and has not seen him like that since. That seems like a lie to me. At the time, President Biden's team attributed some of the struggles to fatigue and illness following a demanding traveling schedule and a recent cold. Despite the criticism that followed the debate, Joe Biden remained one of her husband's strongest supporters, and in the moments after the debate, she encouraged him to publicly stay in the race and defend his performance. But as pressure from Democrat leaders, donors, and voters continued to grow in weeks that followed, President Biden ultimately made the historic decision to end his re-election campaign and endorse Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee. Now, nearly 2 years later, Joe Biden's reflections are providing a new behind-the-scenes look at one of the most consequential nights in modern presidential politics, a debate that reshaped the 2024 election and altered the course of American political history. That is for sure. Why does Joe Biden have to bring this up now? Why? And the fact that she's bringing this up now just to lie. Come on. We know that Joe Biden frequently had moments like that behind closed doors and some in the public eye. Joe Biden, of course, is going to stand by Joe Biden, but she can't lie and say she's never seen him like that since. Are you serious? Joe Biden rarely did any interviews. He rarely did any press conferences. And now I know that was because he did not want people to see his real condition. He didn't. It was a huge mistake for him to run again for re-election. It was a huge mistake. He was supposed to be a transitional president, and he was supposed to then pass the torch to someone else, preferably someone way younger. And he was supposed to guide whoever that person would be to continue his successful presidency, because Joe Biden had a successful presidency, but he was physically and mentally declining. He just was. And obviously the person that he should have been grooming was Vice President Kamala Harris. So what he should have done was know from the start to not run for re-election because of his mental and physical decline. He should have continued to promote Kamala Harris in certain ways during his presidency, not just the border, which made her look horrible. He should have put her out there more. She should have done more press conferences on his behalf because of his decline. He didn't want to be seen. She should have been doing more interviews, doing more press conferences. She should have been involved in more initiatives during the administration to groom her to run for election in 2024 and ultimately win the primary, ultimately become the Democratic nominee, and ultimately win in 2024. I believe that if Joe Biden had never ran for re-election, we wouldn't have Trump 2.0 today. Joe Biden is at fault for having Trump now. He was so worried about his legacy that he was willing to risk it all and do this stupid debate in June when there's never a debate in June. There's never a debate in June, ever. But he wanted to do it because, I want to show the world that I actually am physically and mentally fit. It did the opposite. It showed that you actually are not physically and mentally fit for office. You thought that you would be ready because you had a week to prepare for this. So you thought that you would have done a better job because you had to prepare for a week straight. And that is why I believe they were trying to have this debate. They were trying to gaslight the American people. Through the preparation, he thought he would do a better job, but the actual reality of his condition actually came out. It came out. So it just is annoying. It just is, because all he had to do was just be upfront and say, listen, I'm a transitional candidate, or I'm a transitional president, and I'm going to really put my support behind Vice President Kamala Harris. These are the initiatives that she's going to do as vice president. And also, I'm going to support her as candidate. And if Kamala Harris was the candidate before ultimately becoming the nominee, I'm sure it would have only been a few other Democrats to run against her. I would have predicted it would have looked like 2016, the Democratic primary 2016, where it was only like 5 of them before it really narrowed down to just Hillary and Bernie. I believe it would have been the same in 2024. And I believe it would have been probably just a few more other candidates to run because of Kamala Harris and her success as a vice president and the grooming that Biden did for Kamala to support her, to really put her out there. She would have become the nominee because of the party support of her. And then she would have won. She only lost by 2 million votes. If she had more than 107 days, she would have won. She would have won. Joe Biden's selfish decision to run for re-election is a reason why I'm so passionate. I'm hitting my mic. Is a reason why we have Trump right now. I'm just saying. And now Joe Biden wants to lie and say, I thought he was having a stroke. If you thought he was having a stroke, why didn't you call 911? Why didn't you call 911? If you thought he was having a stroke. Are we kidding me? If you thought he was having a stroke, you should have called 911. And not take him to Waffle House afterwards, all happy. After you just ruined everything. Joe Biden and Joe Biden and they're gaslighting the American people is why we're here today. And then the nerve of both of them to say, well, if Joe Biden was the nominee, he would have won against Trump. They're the only people that think that. They're the only ones that think that. No one actually believes that Joe Biden would have won against Donald Trump. Joe Biden was behind in the polls in 2024. Trump was in the lead polls-wise before Biden dropped out the race because of the ballot concerns of his age and his decline. There was no way that Joe Biden was going to win. If anything, it would have been a worse loss for the Democrats. It would have been a worse loss across the board in 2024. It would have been a worse loss for Democrats if Biden remained in. So for both of them to say, oh, if Joe Biden was the nominee, he would be in Trump is not like why. And I think that's disrespectful to Kamala Harris, who you threw her into this unfair situation, gave her 107 days to run for president. And it's disrespectful to then say, well, yeah, we knew she wasn't gonna win. If Biden stayed in, he would have won. So everyone made the biggest mistake by pushing him out. No. After the debate, after the disastrous debate, I had conversations with family and friends saying that Biden needed to drop out. And many people were worried, understandably worried about what that would mean. But I knew the best thing for him to do was to drop out. And it was, even though Kamala Harris lost, it was still the right thing to do. He should have never ran for re-election. It was selfish. It was irresponsible. And I commend Kamala Harris for what she did in 107 days. Was her campaign perfect? No. But how can you even have a close to perfect campaign in 107 days? She was not given a fair chance at all. And on this show, we're going to talk about maybe her possibly running in 2028. We're definitely going to talk about that on this podcast. But it's just annoying that Joe Biden is now speaking about this and still lying and saying that Joe Biden isn't in physical or mental decline. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. That's why he did no interviews, no press conferences at all, because he was declining physically and mentally, and no one wanted to put him out there at all. And then you wanted to gaslight the American people and say that it's because we want to have a debate because he's so fit, and you want to spend a week preparing. Oh my gosh. And you want to spend a week preparing, and what did it do? Nothing. So it's infuriating to me. But let's move on to something else that's equally infuriating. One of the biggest stories in journalism this week isn't coming from Washington. It is coming from CBS News. The legendary news program 60 Minutes, long considered one of the most respected institutions in American journalism, is facing major internal turmoil following a series of firings, leadership changes, and debates over editorial independence. The controversy began after Paramount, CBS's parent company, was acquired by Skydance Media following the acquisition from Barry Weiss, a political commentator, not journalist, was appointed to lead CBS News with a mission to modernize the network and expand its appeal. Since then, several high-profile staff members who have been removed, including longtime correspondent Scott Pelley, was fired for openly criticizing network leadership during a staff meeting. Pelley accused executives of undermining the culture and independence that made 60 Minutes successful. His firing sparked concern among journalists and media observers who worried about corporate influence over newsroom decisions. The situation is particularly significant because it comes after Paramount agreed to pay President Trump $16 million to settle a lawsuit related to a 2024 60 Minutes interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris. While the company denied wrongdoing, many journalists viewed the settlement as a troubling precedent and a sign of growing political pressure on major news networks. Trump's relationship with the media has reshaped the industry for more than a decade, from frequently labeling mainstream outlets as fake news to filing lawsuits against media companies. Trump has often challenged traditional journalism institutions. Supporters argued he has exposed media bias, while critics say his attacks have weakened public trust in independent reporting. Now, that broader debate is playing out inside one of television's most influential news programs. And despite this, there are journalists who are choosing to stay at 60 Minutes, including veteran correspondents Leslie Stahl, Bill Whittaker, and John Wilton. Hopefully I'm pronouncing their names correctly. They have announced that they will remain with 60 Minutes. Paramount CEO David Ellison has reportedly assured staff that the program will remain editorially independent. But many journalists say that they will be watching closely to see whether those promises are kept. As the media landscape continues to evolve, the battle over 60 Minutes has become about more than just one television show. It's a test of how journalism navigates corporate ownership, political pressure, and public trust in an increasingly polarized America. This is incredibly concerning for the American news landscape. Bari Weiss is unqualified to be editor-in-chief of CBS News. She's not a journalist. She's never been a journalist. She is working to please MAGA. All the decisions she's making are to please MAGA, and they are politically motivated. And that is incredibly concerning. The fact that you are firing so many people who have dedicated years to 60 Minutes, who have dedicated years to CBS News. She doesn't know what she's doing. Bari Weiss does not know what she's doing at all. And it's sad what has happened to 60 Minutes and CBS News. CBS News was considered, honestly, the best of the best. It just was. Until Skydance Media acquired Paramount, David Ellison appointed Bari Weiss to be editor-in-chief of CBS News, and those decisions have completely destroyed 60 Minutes and has completely destroyed CBS News. I'm happy with the journalists who are speaking up, who worked there and were unjustly fired. I'm glad that they're speaking up and are talking about what is actually happening there. The decisions that are happening are politically motivated because of President Trump and his influence, and he is looking to influence all of the media. CNN is next. They're trying to acquire CNN based on the Warner Brothers merger with Paramount that could be happening. They're trying to get to CNN, and maybe through that, they might eventually try to get to another major news organization. They're trying to take over the news landscape with MAGA propaganda. And it is incredibly worrying. And this is just the beginning of what could happen with Trump's influence. And even after Trump, after he leaves the White House, this influence is still going to impact CBS News in 60 Minutes. It just is. This is going to forever taint CBS News. No matter how long Bari Weiss is going to be in this position, I'm sure they're just going to appoint another MAGA puppet. But I'm not even going to bet money that they're going to fire Bari Weiss. Even though this is not a good look for CBS News and this is not a good look for CBS, many people are calling to boycott Paramount. This is not good for business. And I don't know if they're going to fire Bari Weiss, but even if they do, they're not going to then appoint someone who is the complete opposite and is actually looking to report real facts and real news. This is going to completely taint and completely destroy CBS News in 60 Minutes and the other programs. I mean, look at what's happening with CBS Evening News. The ratings are tanking with the pro-Israel propagandist who is now the host. The ratings are completely tanking. If you compare CBS Evening News to ABC World Nightly News and NBC Nightly News. If you compare CBS to those, the CBS evening news ratings are completely tanking. Completely tanking. So this is gonna destroy CBS in many ways. And we're gonna continue to follow this story for sure. And our final story tonight is also something pretty enraging. This is a pretty enraging episode, guys. A lot of enraging things are happening in this political climate. But our final story tonight looks at two cases that have reignited a national debate over race, self-defense, and whether justice is applied equally in America. In Texas, 19-year-old Karmelo Anthony was sentenced to 35 years in prison after being convicted of murdering Austin Metcalf, a white student he fatally stabbed during an altercation at high school track meet in 2025. Anthony argued he acted in self-defense after Metcalf physically confronted him, but prosecutors said he escalated a minor dispute by pulling out a knife and stabbing Metcalf in the chest. A jury rejected Anthony's self-defense claim and convicted him of murder. The case became a lightning rod online, generating intense racial political debates. Supporters argued Anthony, a black teenager, was treated more harshly than other defendants who successfully claimed self-defense. Critics maintained the facts of the case justified the conviction. The sentencing drew renewed attention after rapper Cardi B called the 35-year sentence disgusting and accused prosecutors of making an example out of him. At the same time, another case in South Carolina produced a dramatically different outcome. Rick Chow, a former gas station owner, was acquitted of murder after fatally shooting a 14-year-old black teenager, Cyrus Carmack-Belton. He wrongly suspected him of shoplifting bottled water in 2023. Like, shoplifting bottled water is even worth killing someone, but it was wrong. He wasn't even shoplifting in the first place. Prosecutors argued Chow chased Cyrus and never needed to use deadly force. Defense attorneys countered that Chow believed his son was in danger after the teenager allegedly pointed a firearm. Allegedly, let's keep that clear. Jurors ultimately found Chow not guilty. For many observers, the contrast between the two verdicts has become part of a larger conversation about unequal justice. Supporters of Anthony point to cases such as Kyle Rittenhouse and now Rick Chow, arguing that self-defense claims are often viewed differently depending on who is standing trial. Others argue the cases involve different facts, different state laws, and different legal standards. What remains undeniable is that both cases have left families grieving and communities divided. And as debates over race, self-defense, and accountability continue, these verdicts are likely to remain at the center of a broader national discussion about fairness in the American justice system. So it's just heartbreaking all around. However, I want to pose just this thought. What if the situation was reversed for the Karmelo Anthony situation? What if Austin Metcalf went to this tent, Karmelo Anthony was trying to get him to leave and was being physically aggressive towards Metcalf, and then Metcalf then stabs Karmelo Anthony and kills him? I will bet money that Austin Metcalf would have been acquitted because of the self-defense claim. It is a different system for different people. I don't even want to say for different people. It's a different system for everyone else but Black people. Black people do not have the same grace. Black people are seen automatically as guilty before the trial even begins. For example, with Rick Chow, who murdered a 14-year-old boy who didn't even shoplift. But that was apparently self-defense for Rick Chow, who was Asian. That was self-defense. Kyle Rittenhouse, who murdered 2 people, has become a hero in MAGA because he was defending himself, self-defense. George Zimmerman, who murdered Trayvon Martin, was acquitted because of self-defense claims. But Karmelo Anthony has the same defense of this was self-defense, but he was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. It is a different system. It is a different system for Black people. It is a different system for Black people. It just is. So I don't even really want to get into should have Karmelo stabbed him, all that. That's not really important to me. What is important to me is to point out is that if the situation was reversed within the Metcalf-Anthony situation, Metcalf would have been acquitted. And the right-wing media, who they are focusing a lot on this case because they want to paint a Black boy as this horrible thug who was a great student. He was not a thug. He comes from a great family. They want to paint this Black boy as a thug. And that's why the media keeps talking about this, specifically the right-wing media. They are talking about this case to paint Black people in a horrible light, to paint Karmelo Anthony in a horrible light. If this was reversed, they would have been championing Austin Metcalf if he stabbed Karmelo Anthony. They would have been like, yeah, it was self-defense, and the Black thug was trying to physically threaten Metcalf. He had to defend himself. Just like they said about Kyle Rittenhouse, who became their savior, just like they said about George Zimmerman, and also just like they said about Rick Chow. Why are Black people the ones that are automatically looked as thugs, as criminal, but no one else is automatically looked in that light? When Karmelo Anthony was crying in the courtroom, the right-wing media was all over that, saying, oh, he's crying, he murdered an innocent boy. But when Kyle Rittenhouse was crying in court after he murdered 2 people, look at Kyle Rittenhouse, he feels so bad about what he did. And it was clearly self-defense. He didn't mean to kill people. He didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. It's a different system. It's not fair. It's not fair. If Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted, Karmelo Anthony should have been acquitted. But it's not surprising that Karmelo Anthony wasn't acquitted. It's not surprising. Because Black people are immediately viewed in a negative light. It was an all-white jury. That alone made me realize that this was probably not going to go in Anthony's favor. In an all-white jury in a predominantly white county, they were not going to even look at the facts of the situation. They saw that an innocent white boy was killed and this Black thug was the murderer. That's what the white jury, that's what they were going to think. It's disappointing. It's heartbreaking for everyone involved. It's heartbreaking for the Metcalfs too. They lost a son. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for everyone. But still, it's a different system. It is a different system. And I cannot stress that enough. And honestly, and seeing Karmelo Anthony and his mugshot after he was found guilty is heartbreaking. He had his life ahead of him. He had his life ahead of him. And it's heartbreaking that Austin Metcalf, his life was taken away from him at a young age. The situation is heartbreaking all around, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a different system. And I believe that if the roles were reversed, the right-wing media would have been Team Austin, and that Karmelo Anthony deserved to get stabbed because he was threatening this white boy and he deserved to defend himself. The Republicans love to talk about self-defense. That's why they're pro-gun, pro-this, pro-that. They love to talk about, and we need the right to defend themselves. That's what the Republicans say all the time. But except for Black people. Black people are the only ones that aren't allowed to do that. It's unfair. So I'm just praying for all who are involved in that situation. And I'm also praying for the family of Cyrus Carmack-Belton. Because the fact that Rick Chow was acquitted is insane. Insane. An innocent 14-year-old boy was fatally shot, and there was no justice. But that's America for you. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in to Power, Policy, and Progress with Madison Maynard. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Please make sure to tune in next Tuesday. We'll be back with more political news, analysis, and conversations about the issues shaping our nation. In the meantime, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Power, Policy, and Progress podcast for online content. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, please follow, and rate the podcast, preferably 5 stars, to show your support. And of course, join the conversation. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topics. I love to hear from you. I love to hear your perspectives. If you disagree with me, if you agree with me, please leave a comment and let's keep the conversation going. I might do a segment where I read comments of reactions to different topics that I discuss. So please leave a comment. I love to hear from you. And thank you again for listening. I'm Madison Maynard, and you're listening to Power, Policy, and Progress. I'll see you next week.